I think first and foremost, thanks everyone for coming. It means a lot to all of us that you're here and taking the time out of your day to talk to these amazing people and learn more about ethical business and what that means in our society. So my name's Andrea, for those who don't know me, and I'm calling in from the land of the Wurundjeri people right here in Melbourne. And since all of us are virtually gathering on Aboriginal land, before we get started, I'd like to pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land and elders past, present and emerging. So I'm one of the co-conveners of Monash Future Thinkers, and that's Elaine.
Hi.
Our fellow co-convener, and we work alongside a beautiful team here that's helped put this amazing event together. On top of that, I also have the privilege here of helping facilitate a wonderful conversation about ethical enterprises and its future. Before we begin our chat, please thumbs up or clap if you've heard of Monash Future Thinkers before or have been to one of our events. All right, a fair few. So Monash Future Thinkers is all about initiating interdisciplinary conversations about our shared long-term future. So we're not only about change now, we're also about considering the impacts of these changes 50 years from now. So with that, we decided that there was no one better to speak about these issues than social enterprise owners, the people who've had to balance the challenges of making profit and change. So how is this going to work? So while I will be facilitating this conversation, we still want you to be as involved as possible. So please use the chat section to get involved and ask questions. If you want to ask a question and speak directly to a panelist, please use the raise your hand function in the participant section down below. And also, if you need to pop out at any time, please note that we'll be recording this session on our socials and posting them on our socials, so you'll be able to catch up, no problem. So without further ado, we have our panelists, Nick from Homey Clothing, Sharon from Indigiearth, and Sally from Green Collect. So I think the best way to start this would be if our panelists could introduce themselves, talk a bit about their businesses and how they got started. So Sally, since you're closest to me in the little panel screen, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, sure. I'm Sally Quinn and I'm the co-founder and CEO at Green Collect. We're an environmental social enterprise. We work to kind of eliminate the notion of waste and provide solutions for complex forms of waste that would otherwise go to landfill. So we prioritise reuse, upcycling and recycling is kind of our last resort. We operate 2 retail outlets. We have about 400 customers across Melbourne, and we operate an education program as well. But I'll tell you how we got started, because it wasn't like that in the beginning. I was a student actually when my partner Darren and I came up with the idea. I had studied science, then moved to arts, then wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I did a double major in criminology. And then I, after working as a youth worker for a number of years, did further graduate study in social work. And it was while I was studying social work and then started working as a social worker that I just started to feel really frustrated working within systems that seemed broken. So I worked in St Kilda with women who were homeless. And one of the things that was so apparent to me was that employment is such a key to moving out of homelessness, in terms of the economic empowerment, the connection to the community, feeling productive, and observed with a lot of the women I worked with that it was pretty impossible to get a house or private rental if you didn't have a job. And it's pretty hard to get a job if you don't have a fixed address. So I just felt that frustration and kind of had this dream that maybe, you know, I could start a business and the people we would employ would be people who were homeless or in some sort of crisis that meant that they weren't able to access employment. So that was kind of the dream. And at the same time, my partner was studying environmental policy and planning, and he just was so frustrated when he would go to uni. So we were both students, and he'd see skips in the city full of good stuff, and, you know, usually would bring stuff home with him. And then we were like, maybe we could create a business. Maybe we could look at salvaging things that are seen as waste in the city and create jobs. Yeah, so that's how we started Green Collect. We didn't really have any money behind us, and kind of just, ran a pilot actually, firstly, gathered some data and then applied for funding. And we're really lucky that we got some seed funding so that we could just get off the ground and incrementally build the business to where it is now. So, you know, we're achieving, and we measure our impact in terms of environmental impact, but also our social impact is really the heart of the business and why we exist. So our workforce is between 30 and 40 people, and most of those people come from backgrounds of homelessness, refugee backgrounds, mental health, a range of, often combination of those factors. And it's just an awesome place to work. And, you know, for me, that's why I do this. And this is why I work hard, because we're seeing something that really changes things for people.
Thanks so much, Sally. I really liked, in particular, how you talked about wanting to give opportunities to those who didn't in the past, and taking on board things in the city that, you know, that were being thrown, because I think we can all relate to, you know, sometimes we just kind of throw away things that could be used for, like, really well, like we just don't give a chance. And I think upcycling is really an amazing cause. Sharon, do you want to talk about your enterprise and how you got started?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Sharon Winsor, and I'm a Nambar Walewan person from northwest New South Wales. And one side of my family is Aboriginal, my mum's side, and my dad's side is white. So I grew up out in the bush, and one of the things that we done for fun, coming from a very poor background, was being out collecting bush fruits and gathering our own foods and pretty much surviving off the land where we could. So when I was in my early 20s, I ended up in Sydney and going to university. I had always missed that connection with the land and with country and with bush foods. And I really wanted to help educate people around, you don't look Aboriginal, you don't, you know, fit the stereotype of being Aboriginal. So as you may all know, it's much broader than that. So I started in business a very long time ago. I worked up to developing Indigiearth, which now is predominantly a retail brand. I produce a whole range of Australian native foods, beverages, selling cooking ingredients, native skincare products, and lots of natural goodness from the bush. So my passion around that is being able for people to experience bush tucker and culture and education through food, and also in the process working with lots of our communities. So where I can, probably 90% of my ingredients come back from Aboriginal communities across the country, and helping those communities establish business, grow their bush food enterprises and knowledge around business as well. Also very big on wild harvesting and sustainable practices around growing bush foods. So I do a lot through education, through like the bush tucker workshops and demonstrations, and helping people understand more than just bush food and connecting people to culture through bush foods.
Thanks, Sharon. I think that's such a beautiful cause, and I think it's really going to help society in general. Nick, do you want to? Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Nick, do you want to talk about Homey and how how you got started and what it's about.
No worries. Yeah, thanks for having us. And I feel like Sally kind of encapsulated what my sort of experience was as well, talking about working with people who are experiencing homelessness. So I'm from Homey, based in Melbourne, and we're an organisation that supports young people affected by homelessness or hardship, to equip them with the skills, confidence, and experiences to kind of be more work ready and better prepared for their future is kind of our statement. So it's really about opportunity through employment is kind of our big go, and specifically working in the retail environment. Youth homelessness is such a represented group. It's the biggest percentage of people experiencing homelessness in the country, out of that 116,000, and retail industry itself is the biggest employer of young people. So we kind of made the marriage between the two to create employment opportunities through our own brand and our own store in Brunswick Street in Fitzroy in Melbourne, and also working with some big retailers in the country, so brands like Bonds and Champion and Cotton On, and actually training their staff to be able to deliver the opportunities to young people in their own workplaces as well. So that's kind of one side of what we do. And then the other side is obviously we have an apparel brand, and obviously we're kind of currently fully online, and we use all the profits from those sales to facilitate that side of things, as well as we offer a VIP day shopping experience. Once a month, we close our store to the public and we invite youth homelessness service into our store, and the guys get to shop for free and choose 5 items of brand new clothing at their own discretion, and coffee and haircuts and all that kind of stuff. But we get the guys who've graduated our program in the retail space to come back and facilitate that day. So you've got kind of that peer-to-peer support and lived experience, and someone kind of encouraging this new young person to apply to join the program, etc. So it's been going really well. It's been about 5 years. Kind of fell into it really in a sense of studying and being curious about the issue of homelessness and why people were living rough and what we could do as a community, and a bit more about the issue itself, and kind of just jumped into it head first and spoke to someone who was living rough and shook their hand and got down to their level and had a conversation, and it kind of evolved from there. We started a Facebook page sharing the stories of these people who were living rough with their consent and in their own words, to try and dispel some of those preconceived notions towards homelessness and kind of communicate the complexity of the issue itself. And as you said, Sally, you can't, get your mail if you don't have a fixed address, all these things. But once again, we also saw the value in, as you said, employment opportunities being a really critical piece of the puzzle. And, we're not a relief centre. We don't provide the kind of clinical side of support, etc., or the housing, all the rest of it, but we collaborate and associate with organisations that do, so that young person already has that foundation, and then we just complement them with kind of this missing piece of the puzzle, which is an opportunity to work. And beyond that, I guess retail being a bit of a launch pad, might not be the forever kind of career, but most of us began working flipping burgers in a store or working in a clothing store, whatever it was, so we realised it's a great conduit to kind of develop into personal skills and all the rest of it. So that's kind of been the journey in a bit of a snapshot.
Thanks so much, Nick. I think it's a really perfect marriage, and I think you're absolutely right about how young people in retail is definitely perfectly go hand in hand. So what I'm kind of curious about is that a lot of businesses nowadays have some kind of corporate social responsibility effort, whether that be an affiliated charity, some environmental targets, they try to raise awareness about something. But your businesses definitely have made that kind of corporate social responsibility part of your business model. So what goes into making that decision?
Do you want us to, one of us to start, or do you want to kind of allocate?
Either anyone.
I'll kick it off, and then maybe we can work in the sense of if you want to ask directly, or we can just kind of all have a crack at the question. I'm happy to do whatever, honestly.
Yeah.
My 2 cents would be, we didn't know any better in terms of kind of establishing our composition and all the rest of it. And what we found was that, the benefit of being both we're a company limited by a guarantee, but we're also a registered charity. So we're able to kind of generate our own income, but also receive donations and grant funding and philanthropy, which is a really critical piece of supporting our endeavour as well. So to be honest, we didn't actually know any better in terms of we set up kind of to do something, realised that pretty quickly into the picture that, without any profit, there's no purpose. And that's a really critical learning that we had. And beyond that, we were technically classified as a not-for-profit, but we want to try and make as much profit as possible, obviously. So we're a for-purpose organisation is kind of the language that's being used now. And you probably hear that a lot because we essentially want to try and make as much profit as possible, because the more profit, the greater the purpose and the more you can do, etc. So for us, it was initially an awareness campaign that we started via Facebook, and then that translated across into this kind of physical store and all the rest of it. But its composition kind of came about really uniquely. It was like, okay, we want to try and run a business, but we also kind of need some seed funding and all the rest of it. And people wanted to support this cause that we were aligned with, which was homelessness. And then on a deeper level, we kind of delved into youth homelessness. So it was one of those things that was quite intuitive in terms of, we didn't set out to kind of start a charity or whatever. It was kind of like, okay, well, we're going to kind of create a model that's going to work for us and going to work for our consumers, and then we'll see what it falls into/under. So that's kind of been our little journey into it. But the most important thing has been, without any profit, there's no purpose. So we're a purpose-led organisation, and we want to try and make as much profit as possible.
Yeah, probably similar to us in that when we started, we were really clear about what we want or why we wanted to do this. And then we tried to find a vehicle that would suit that. So we're also a company limited by guarantee. So any profits go back in 100% into our social and environmental mission. Corporate citizenship, it's a funny term, and it's probably more corporates. One of the corporates we worked with early on who supported or funded our pilot actually was BP Australia. And, for fossil fuel companies who are essentially not doing great things for the world, they're forced to think about that, and they need to address shareholder concern or community concern about the harm that they're causing. So they're trying to balance that with doing some good. So that worked for us. We were a bit ethically unsure about that because we were, in our younger days, really quite radically involved in activism, and particularly probably protesting against companies like BP. And when they offered to fund our pilot, we felt like we had a massive ethical dilemma, and we were like, no, we can't take their money. Corporates are evil. And, we talked to some people, kind of older people who we trusted, and they just said, take their money and do good. Someone will take that money, is going to go somewhere. You guys take it, you do good with it. And so we went in with that frame of mind. So rather than saying, oh, how does Green Collect be a good corporate citizen? We don't really have to ask ourselves that questions. We're probably doing the opposite. We're saying we're so purpose driven. How do we create a business that can support that and that can fund that? And so if anything, we've had to force ourselves to think more like business people and be entrepreneurial in that, so that we can sustain and grow our social mission. And while we have GGR status, we don't rely a lot on grants. We look more for investment to grow the business, to deepen the impact. So, a lot of growing and learning along the way. I hadn't heard the term social enterprise or, knew nothing about business. So it's been when we started in 2005, not a lot was known. There weren't a lot of enterprises around. So we were just feeling our way, pretty heart driven, made a lot of mistakes. So now I think that, students are studying this, there's a lot more to draw on to help understand what you're doing. Whereas we were really just feeling our way, and, following our hearts, essentially being a bit reckless, in a way that I don't know if, being my age, I would do again, but certainly in our 20s, that was the time to take those risks. Sharon, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, awesome. That's amazing. I've always been, I guess, culturally and spiritually driven more than, I guess, social corporate responsibility. And that's been really important to me. And I feel that, as a cultural business and based on culture that's more than 60,000 years old, that if I don't do the right thing culturally by what I do, what I believe in and what I put out there, then things won't work. And, it must be based on respect, sharing, caring, looking after each other, looking after Mother Earth, the land. So that's very, very close to my heart and what I do. And I always put back, I believe that I don't own the knowledge that I have around bush foods and traditional foods and culture. And that's, I need to pass that on, and trying to get more of our younger generations into, you know, reconnecting with culture through food, healthier lifestyles for our people in communities by having, you know, bush tucker again. So things are very culturally and spiritually driven for me. I'm passionate about putting back into Aboriginal children's health. I lost my first child. He was stillborn and had a hole in the heart. So I'm very passionate about putting back to Aboriginal children's health, and especially around heart disease and things like that. So yes, things I still very much believe that, you know, as an Aboriginal person, if I don't do the right thing in business culturally, then things won't work, and it's important for me to do that.
Thank you all so much. I think that you all put it really beautifully about how you need to be more purpose-driven and driven by your passions in order to start a successful enterprise in this way. And we might take a question from Kiara here to everyone in the panel who is touching on Sally's point about making mistakes and learning from them. What has been the biggest thing you've learned from starting up your business?
Maybe an area that I'll talk about is personal sustainability and being in it for the long haul. Starting a social enterprise or being committed to starting a social or for-purpose business and seeing it through to a point where it's sustainable or could be handed over to someone else. It's a really long, slow process. Well, it has been for us. It's not like a tech startup or something that you know, build it and sell it and profit. You know, for me, when it's time to move on, and I think about succession, you know, I take nothing from Green Collect. You know, it's work that I leave, and there's a big, huge personal investment and cost. And I think it's really just important to think about who your support networks are. We tried to do a lot on our own. So I was, you know, running it with my partner, and we kind of tag teamed a bit, but we didn't draw an income for years. And so we had to be content with, you know, struggling financially, taking other consulting jobs on the side. Yeah, carrying a lot of personal risk. And we had a lot of safety nets, you know, being able to call the parents or whoever it is, was, well, I suppose, you know, allowed us to keep going. But that wasn't sustainable. And I think both of us probably reached a point of burnout. And, you know, Nick was talking about not being a social service or providing the relief or emergency kind of support people needed. Because I was a social worker and I'd worked in that system, you know, we were trying to be employers, but also meet people's other housing needs and counselling. And, you know, we would be driving around to public housing or squats with our kids in the back of the car, taking people food. You know, you can't really live like that for many years. And there were, you know, there's been critical points where we've just kind of gone, we can't keep doing this. And what we realised was that we needed to be more disciplined in building the business model, training others, bringing in experts. And, you know, that was really hard, because it's pretty hard to invite accountants in to look at your books when you know it's a mess. And, you know, we had one accountant come in and just say, I was never here. I never saw this. Please don't tell anyone I ever looked at this. You know, so it's hard to get support and let people know how things really are. But I think the earlier you can do that, build a community of support, be that for your own needs, and having some balance in your life, but also support for the enterprise. Who are the experts in governance? Who are the experts who can help you work out your issues around solvency? So we're knowing your own limits, I suppose, and asking for help, being open to help, So now we have a strong management team. I know, you know, if I take a couple of months off, things don't fall apart. So building at the right time, the support's in. I could share so many mistakes. I wouldn't. Yeah, it's a pretty tough road, I think. So when young people say, oh, I want to start a social enterprise, I try to be pretty realistic about what it's taken for us. And yeah, but also kind of say, jump into it with your heart and give it a go. Like there's never the right time. It'll never be a totally secure thing to do. But for us, it's been an amazing journey. And, you know, there's not a lot we'd change, even though there's been lots of mistakes.
Yeah, definitely. It's been lots of mistakes on this end too. But I think the one thing that you can't teach is passion. And if you don't have the passion, then I don't think it's ever going to work. So you need to have that passion. And probably the hardest thing I've ever had to learn is to say no. There's some things that you just can't do, and it's okay to say no. And it took me a long time to learn that.
So Huidong has a question. She says, what is your business experience like after the shift of online working, and what has changed in your businesses?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick that off. From our perspective, I guess, we obviously have a bricks and mortar store, which is a real breadwinner for us, or has been, in terms of being a prime location, right in the heart of Fitzroy, right where our demographic shops and all the rest of it. And as I said, a really valuable source of income. So, you know, for us shutting that down, like, you know, almost every business that the dog is going through right now, has obviously been a significant financial incurrence. And I guess what you have to do is then just, you know, react and plan accordingly and manage and preserve your cash reserves. I mean, people say cash is king, but cash flow is king. So that's really, really important. One of the biggest things that we've had to kind of immediately kind of jump on is being really conscious of our spend, and obviously, like everyone, cutting costs where possible. Obviously, us not having a physical store impacts on the program delivery as well, so having to kind of refine that and provide an additional offering, because the challenge being, if we don't do anything, then obviously, you know, our funding supporters, you know, that may wane, so I need to kind of demonstrate, you know, resilience and tenacity there. So it's kind of a balancing act to make sure that you can still do something, but what we have done obviously is really try and focus and consolidate online, and it's amazing what happens when you put all your efforts and attention into that. It's been a real struggler for us in terms of revenue. For a long time, it's been our store that's been the biggest performer, but you know, by having all of our assets redeployed in fulfillments and just customer experience, it's gone up exponentially, which is really pleasing as well. So, you know, there's something to take away from it, but they've been our big key things.
Yeah, it's been reasonably similar to us. One thing I think about social enterprises, when you start a business with lots of challenges, you're creative, you kind of know how to dig deep, your team knows how to do that, you're agile, you can pivot. And we've been really conscious to never be really heavy on admin and layers of decision making, so we can really quickly turn something around, probably like both Sharon and Nick. And our bricks and mortar shop was one of our biggest revenue streams as well, and that's closed at the moment. But you know, you look for opportunities. I mean, that's what entrepreneurs do. And we were, one of our customers is a big bank, and they use us for their branch refurbishments, and we make sure it's an ethical closure or refurb, and make sure all of the assets, be that furniture or stationery or whatever it is, have ethical outcomes. And so we were sitting on probably 100 office chairs and desks, and we were struggling to move them. Suddenly with COVID, we've sold them all in about 2 weeks. So we've made a lot of money through that. But more importantly, it's kept people in work. So, you know, we just quickly got everything on Gumtree. We didn't set up a perfect shop. It wasn't awesome looking and on our website, but we just ramped it up and redeployed, you know, shifted our focus. So we're trading online just via Gumtree. We won't do it that way forever, but it was quick and it was effective. So, you know, sometimes things like this happen, and it helps you see another opportunity. We've always been thinking that e-commerce was something we needed to grow, but you know, when you're running something that's lean, you know, to have that time to invest and look somewhere else and give it a real go, not just sort of tinker on the side, those opportunities don't come along very often. So we've enjoyed doing that. But I think the hardest thing for us, you know, was making cuts to expenses, which obviously is what you've got to prolong your life. So, you know, working on reducing rent, any discretionary spending, not that we have a lot of that, but really it had to come in the form of staff cutbacks. But, you know, we're just so thankful for the JobKeeper scheme, because it means no one's losing their job at Green Collect. And for us, that was just heart-wrenching, because for our staff, work is the most important thing often in their lives, and it's the safest place for them, and it's the best source of information and all of that. So to not have your staff coming when it's the lifeline for them, you know, has been really hard. So we had to shrink things a bit around risk of transmission. So managing all of the health and safety stuff was obviously paramount for any business. So, you know, we've got some staff who are quite high risk because they're sleeping rough and on public transport and living in close contact with others. So managing that, you know, is really tough. You know, what's your responsibility to the common good and the broader public, and what's your responsibility to individuals? And, you know, I think one of the things that entrepreneurs or social entrepreneurs need to have is a really good sense of judgment, making fine judgments. And it's kind of, you know, it's not an exact science. So there's something intuitive about that, balancing that, being driven by the heart, but also, you know, responsible thinking around, you know, risk and business.
Sharon, do you have anything to add to how your business has changed?
I just think that it's been, like, as a business person, entrepreneur, is just being able to act quickly and being resilient to those challenges, which I've had lots of challenges over the years, and it's just being able to build your skills around being able to act quickly and come up with new ideas. There's no set rule book on how you can do things to overcome challenges. So you've got to go with your gut, go with your heart, and just make things happen. And that's pretty much what I've done all my life in business, just to make things happen. And I've just found a way. You just find a way to make it happen.
Yeah.
And with that, I kind of have a question for all of our panelists. You guys talk about how to be flexible and resilient, especially throughout this time. Do you have any tips for how we can build resilience or adaptability?
Well, I think that point that was just made before this was really apt by Sharon in regards to, you just have to find a way. I mean, you have to be creative. Like, I think the key is, and you know, there's no secret formula or a potion you can take or whatever that's going to kind of solve your issues for you. You have to take them head on. You have to kind of, you know, cool heads prevail. So, you know, it's really important to try and make sure that, I guess, in a sense, you know, just be able to kind of process things properly and not be so reactive. Take the time, but once again, there isn't really a secret to that, I don't think. I think you know, you just have to kind of really have a crack, give it your best shot. I know this all sounds kind of, you know, like you hear this stuff, it's very romantic terms and all the rest of it, but it's very true. And though these kind of sentiments are sentiments for a reason, because people experience them. So, you know, I think you just have to be that kind of person, or you have to try and will yourself to be that kind of person. I mean, that's obviously my opinion, but you really don't have a whole lot of other choices or options when you're up against the wall. You've got to come out swinging, and that's just how it is.
Yeah, definitely. And I think through this as well, like, everyone's in this for the first time, so nobody's going to have any answers or advice. So we've just had to wing it ourselves and just go with it and do the best that you can. And that's, you know, I think everyone will take that forward in the future as well, is that if you can spin on your heels and just make things happen to survive, then there's no reason why you can't do that in the future when there's no pandemic as well, and use those skills in the future.
Yeah, I was just going to add that, you know, where does resilience come from? I mean, it's, you know, kind of a, you know, probably not an exact scientific answer to that. But what I have observed and what I've seen and know to be true for me is that having some element of struggle in your own life that taps into your why is often a common factor in a lot of entrepreneurs. And I suppose when I reflect on my experience, I grew up in Broadmeadows, and, you know, if you know Melbourne and knew Melbourne in the 70s, that was a pretty rough place to be. And I knew what poverty was like. And even though my family had chosen to be there, my mum was a social worker and university lecturer, and my dad was a school principal, but they were kind of hippies who decided they wanted to go and live in the poorest area and live on minimum wage and make a difference to a community. So I grew up in that situation where I kind of belonged and knew what struggle and poverty was, but I knew our family had more choices than that. So that kind of shaped a lot of things for me, that I have lived alongside people who've really struggled and seen people from different backgrounds. And so I suppose I think something that builds your resilience and your perspective of yourself is have diverse experiences, put yourself in uncomfortable positions, listen to others, and kind of really observe courage and fight and all those things, because it sort of rubs off on you. And I think my advice to people, it's great to start stuff when you're young, but give yourself enough experiences that help you to start to think about what you believe in, what's important to you. Because I think if I didn't know that, we would have given up on Green Collect a long time ago. You know, when we just did want to shut up shop and it was too hard, it was that passion and belief that making a better world for people who've been not given a chance or been not had access to be seen for the value that they can bring. You know, it's that stuff that just drives you, and it's deep down stuff. And somehow I think if you want to work for a better world, you've got to somehow experience the pain of that for others or yourself. That's, I suppose, what I've observed when I have seen people who've done amazing things or think of what we've had to draw on. It's some of that knowledge of how hard life is.
Yeah, I love that answer, Sally. It really is all about empathy, isn't it? We might take a question from Kiara again, and this one's to Sharon. You mentioned wanting to help children and share your culture. How can we as students and as consumers help make a difference with you?
There's lots of children's services and organisations around the country now. So I do things like, you know, donating to those organisations or other people. Some of these organisations actually provide meals for children before and after school. So getting involved in those types of things are really important so that children aren't going to school hungry, or, you know, even some of them are doing some homework centres that may need some assistance with Aboriginal children, just having someone there to read books or do whatever. So I'd encourage people to look up some of the children's services that are around and get involved.
Yeah, that sounds amazing and something that we all can really take on. This one is to Nick from Grey, because Nick, you touched a bit on partnering with larger businesses, but she wants to know and is interested about how you address forming and building relationships with larger companies as a social enterprise, particularly towards the beginning when your business was less established.
Yeah, great question. I guess, you know, that old saying again of it's not what you know, it's who you know, and finding those connections happens in really funny ways. I think it's not just a case of knocking on the door, but maybe it has been for some, but for us, I guess common principles apply, like just, you know, being really courteous and respectful, to just using your manners at all times. Like whenever I've met with someone, and I'll talk about how you actually make those connections and all the rest of it, but it's not you know, coming with a grand plan. It's really being able to demonstrate kind of twofold, the passion as well as the logic behind it, because obviously when you're meeting with these people, they're very time poor, you know, like we all are. So it's really about making sure that you can really clearly articulate the value add to their organization. This is going to make your life easier. It's going to make it far better for your workplace to have this incorporated for your CSR, to try and like really demonstrate the benefits. But I guess it's just manners for one is a really big thing. But then, as I said, like in that window that you have with them, with your pitching and all the rest of it, as I said, I think they connect a lot with obviously the stories first and foremost, and the impact and all the rest of it. So that's a really important part of it. But you want to show that business savvy acumen as well, to make sure that they don't, you know, you're not just coming in with a passion entirely, which is such a critical ingredient, but I think there's a balance there as well. And then how these partnerships come about, I mean, it's really funny, to be honest. Like it's been exploring immediate networks via friends and family, and then their networks beyond that. So, you know, I'll give you an example. One of our connections came about because prior to Homey, I was working part-time as a nanny. So I was working for like a male nanny service, and the family that I worked with were very high up, you know, working in Target. You know, they were kind of executives there, and you know, it was just one of those things that I was starting this kind of hustle at that point in time, and it was just a question of, oh, so Nick, you're doing something in, you know, our area that's really interesting. You know, what can we do to help? And then, you know, having a really clear ask. Another one came about through footy, through my footy club, my old school. It turned out I had to do a presentation to some year 12 boys. And one of the parents there was the head of Hanes Brands Australasia, which is an enormous brand in its own right. If you look it up, it's a global sort of apparel brand, and they have brands like Bonds and Champion and Bras and Things and Sheridan and all this stuff under their umbrella, but that's just in Australia. So it was literally just a connection through that. But I think it's because whenever I presented, you just often, you know, the audience, it's just so many unknowns. You don't know who's in the room. So just making sure that, you know, you can be really clear when you are presenting or conversing about, you know, what your value add is. I think that's been the really critical thing. So maybe there's a bit of luck in there as well, but I think the luck has come about because the more you put yourself out there, the more talks you do in relevant places. Like I'd also say it's not about just scattergunning. Like you realize, you know, your time is really valuable as well. And you want to try and make sure that, yeah, there's a value exchange in everything that you're doing. But if you can put yourself in situations, whether it's going to talks, you know, and just listening, or whether or not you get an opportunity to present yourself or whatever it is, you just don't know who's in the room. And I think the critical thing is that you got to try and make that connection with them. So, you know, as I said, a couple of my partnerships have come about purely through luck, but it's amazing just exploring your network and the networks of the people that are around you, and especially being associated with the university, you know, with Monash. I mean, it's, you know, it's a global network there that you just got to kind of find the right people. And the other key thing is with those organisations is, sorry, not to harp on, but is to find the right people, the real doers. It might be someone who is lower level to the executive you want to get to, but they have a personal connection to what you're doing. They might have had someone in their lives experience homelessness. They might have experienced it themselves. You find that foot soldier who can bring you up to the key decision maker, because that's what you want to get to. Because if you can't kind of break through to those people, you know, that's where the decisions are made, and it's a click of the fingers. So yeah, that's also really key, I think, as well as identifying the right parties in these organisations to take you forward and give you the opportunity to talk to kind of, you know, the person who makes the key decisions.
Thanks so much, Nick. Sally and Sharon, how did you find your experience in getting partners and things like that when you were first starting your business?
I used to be quite scared of that kind of thing, but I soon learnt that companies and CEOs, people at the top, actually really like having a personal connection with a business, with a brand, with an organisation, whatever it is. So they actually like having that personal connection so that they know and they feel like they have that personal connection. So I used to fear it, but then I soon learnt that people were saying to me that, you know, they didn't know how to reach out to some people or organisations or business or to Aboriginal people as well. So they were finding it just as hard to reach out. So actually just I contact people directly and just go for it, and they have that respect. So it is something that, you know, just reach out to those people and just show your true self and what you're doing and what you believe in, and people respect that.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Sally?
I agree with what both Sharon and Nick have said. I think having confidence in what it is you're doing, believing in it, really being clear of the value that you bring to that partner. So that means being really clear on it yourself. What is it that we bring, and how does that relate to what they need? Do they share similar values? So it doesn't, if we pitch to a company who we know has no environmental commitment, no social procurement strategy, the chances of being able to speak, we're not quite sure where that connection is. So usually we'll have done some research, or there'll be some sort of warm lead, and working out what their problem or their hook or their value is really important if you're selling a product or pitching something. So for us, sometimes we talk more about the social stuff and the employment side of what we do, if it's around a social procurement contract, or it might be an organisation, say with Westpac. That was a really big job to get into their supply chain. That it was the environmental, even though we had to go through the social procurement manager, we had to go through the sustainability team, we had to pitch to their group property. Navigating a big organisation's hard, but really knowing what their values are. So I read Westpac's strategic report around their sustainability objectives, and I matched how we could meet those. So I'd done my research, so I could go into a meeting and say, this is how we match this. I knew they used the Sustainable Development Goals as a tool or a benchmark. So I spoke to the Sustainable Development Goals that Green Collect could help them meet. So, but at the same time, it's being human as well. And I don't know, there's sort of that balance of being who you are, but also being pretty professional in those situations and having confidence to know this is worth something to you, and costing it appropriately. It's no use entering into a partnership and the corporate wins and you're getting some little tiny thing and they're getting a massive promotion or whatever opportunity. So costing and knowing your worth is really important too, to make sure that those partnerships are win-win. You don't want to enter into a partnership with a group just because they're big and you kind of get almost nothing from it. So knowing your worth is pretty important too.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That sounds, about right. We might take Izzy's question now. She wants to know what's something you wish someone had told you before you started your business.
I can kick off. I guess Sally made the point previously, but it is just bloody hard work. And that's just being completely honest and transparent, is that from the outside often it looks a lot more glamorous than what it is. Obviously internally, you have constant anxieties and teething pains and a lot of failures and all the rest of it, which is also, the beauty of it as well. You just have a lot more gratitude for, people who work in this space and all the rest of it. But I think that's one thing that, I guess I probably, learned through doing, and you have to have that experience yourself, but it is a real grind and there's a lot of sacrifice you have to make to get it to that place that you really want it to be at. So, there's a lot of things that you just don't precedent, and there's always more than you think there is to actually do. It's I guess not to kind of deter or, be the bearer of bad news, but it really is a massive grind. And it's, one of those things that, certainly I think a lot of people have, and myself as well, is that balance, is that you can often get lost in the balance between, living your life and then, the service of others and all the rest of it. And that's really hard, because I feel like when you tend to look after others, sometimes you can disregard yourself, and that's not good for anyone. So I wish I kind of learned a bit more about self-care and how to operate, as opposed to just kind of continuing to put the head down and just grinding. But it's definitely something, if I had the opportunity again, I would certainly advise myself and others that just keep on looking after yourself and finding that time for yourself, even though you are going to be working overtime and all the rest of it. You've got to have that balance and things to look forward to, because it's just not sustainable otherwise, and that's not good for anyone. So you've got to find a balance for yourself.
Yeah, I agree. Couldn't, I wish I would have been told how many hours that, you know, you would work each week, the struggle financially, and, you know, just even being able to put food on the table for the kids, and just being able to do that. But that's what I go back to, that passion, is that if you've got the passion, you do it, you keep doing it. I used to take things too personally with a lot of stuff. So, you know, if you get 10 opportunities and 9 knockbacks and only 1 comes through, sometimes that would really hurt my feelings personally. But then I've just learnt that, oh well, there's another 10 more I can go after, and another 1 will come of that possibly. So, you know, not taking things personally, but having that passion is key, because might get knocked down, but you just keep getting up again.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys have spoken really well about that in terms of self-care and the hard work and cost and all of that. So I won't say that, but I think for me, finding out my gaps in my skill set and either getting someone else in who can do that, or skilling up in that area. So I think for me, my strengths was in getting alongside people, social work, creating new things, being proactive and positive, but I didn't have good business acumen in terms of like spreadsheets and understanding profit and loss and the numbers. And so I avoided that. I did not want to look at that. And then the end of financial year would come around and I'm thinking, oh, we're okay. And then all of a sudden, once everything's been attributed, it's like, what? We're going to have a $50,000 loss? With the long service leave liability, all these things that I just didn't know about. So I would ignore the things I wasn't good at. And that's not a good strategy. So I think just being quite disciplined in learning things. And so now I love the numbers. Like I was actually really scared of them because I came from not a numbers background. But I think if you want to run a business, you do need some of those skills. I can remember when I was a social worker, once a month, each of us would get rostered on to do the petty cash, and you had to get all the receipts and, you know, and I can remember saying to my supervisor, I shouldn't have to do that. I trained as a social worker. I'm never going to ever run a business. I'm never going to need to know how to do this. And this was a tiny petty cash tin that had $20 in it. And now, you know, $1 million plus budget. And it's just funny that you can think that something's not relevant. So I would just say business skills are a kind of a non-negotiable. Yeah.
This is all such great advice, guys. Thanks so much. I think this might be the last question we pose to the group. Oh, Kiara has another one. But yes, this might be the last question. Where do you see or hope to see your business grow within the next few years?
I think it'd be good to be able to be around for the next few years, I guess, you know, given the current climate and all the rest of it. And, you know, I think for us, it's really about conscious expansion. And certainly one thing we're learning and have learned is that you just don't want to bite off more than you can chew. And really, quality is such an important part of what we do in terms of our programs. We work with a small number of young people, but we deliver a really quality operation, and it's very collaborative and comprehensive. So you just, you know, when you scale, you run the risk of compromising that. But we see a lot of growth, as an example, using our own organisation, both vertically and horizontally, because obviously we can continue to scale employment opportunities and training more businesses and workplaces, etc. But then again, within our own operation, there's so much we can offer in terms of opportunity working in our own team. And as we grow our business, you know, opportunities come up in fulfillment and design and marketing. And we want to really try and make sure that, you know, our whole kind of shop in its entirety, we're working with the people that we want to be working with, which is those who obviously had that experience and then can impart, you know, that onto others and encourage them to jump on board. So that's really where we kind of are happy and keen and all the rest of it. to be honest, is certainly about, I talk about conscious growth and expansion and just never compromising on quality. So we're really proud of that. And, our expectations are just that we'd rather do something for someone than try and do everything for everyone. And that's kind of been a real kind of thing that we've tipped our hat to and rectified in our own minds, that we'd rather do it the right way with the diligence and all the rest of it, than try and do it half-assed and a band-aid solution to this really complex issue. So that's kind of where we sit. And hopefully have a store in New York City one day and all the rest of it. But, who knows? Look, we'll just have to say.
Looking forward to that.
So for Green Collect, growth has been an interesting thing. I think we were just trying to survive for so long that we weren't thinking about growth really. We knew that trying to grow something that wasn't working was going to be a recipe for disaster. So we would just multiply our problems. So we worked really hard on getting our business model right, understanding all of our costs and understanding how the business model works. Ours is very complicated. And so for us, I think it was just getting to a point of survival. And then when we realized, actually this works and it has legs and it is creating deep environmental and social impact, let's look at further deepening that. So the motivation has been more people need jobs like the ones we're creating, more people need access, or, the things that are still going to landfill that we have solutions for. We need to expand our reach so that we can deepen the impact. So that's what drives us. Deeper environmental impact, deeper social impact. And to do that, we need to grow. So we've been on a scale, I suppose our strategic plan has involved scale, where we've just started year 2 of that, which was to double our operation and all of our impacts within a 3-year period. So that was kind of like 35% growth year on year. And we've exceeded that actually. So we're growing 40%, not now with COVID. So we were going to have an awesome end of financial year. We were going to, smash our budget, but that's the motivation. It's, will growth deepen our impact? We don't want to grow for growth's sake. I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in Green Collect being bigger so I look good. Nothing like that. I don't care about that. If anything, Darren and I were like, oh, we could have the quiet life now. It's bubbling along. We can pull back and enjoy it. But we are expanding into Sydney. We already deliver business in Sydney. But again, that's not glamorous. I hate catching a plane. I hate staying up there. I don't like leaving my kids. So it's funny how you want something and then you're like, So certainly there's no personal driver for growth other than we want to deepen the impact. We'll look at models around social franchising and other different models of scale, because it doesn't just mean growing it ourselves. There's lots of ways that Green Collect's impact could deepen. So we're kind of investigating that now.
For me, I'd like to see bush foods become a part of everyday life. I don't want to see the native food industry just being celebrated during NAIDOC week or Reconciliation week. I'd love to see that our brand becomes just a normal everyday part of life. And also, broader than that, growing Aboriginal ownership in the bush food industry. Currently, the native food industry in Australia is only 1% Aboriginal owned. So we need to change that across the industry and our communities. It's worth, 35 million a year in wild harvesting and produce, and only 1% of that is Aboriginal owned. So there's a big change that needs to happen to help support our communities, because that's not only income, but it's connection to culture for our kids. It's continuing cultural practices and all those sorts of things. So that's what my growth is all about for the future.
Thanks so much, guys. There really isn't profit without purpose, as Nick said earlier, and I think that you guys really embody that so well with your causes. So I think today we talked about resilience, we talked about the importance of passion and the importance of adaptability, especially now. Thank you all so much for coming. I think for the next half hour, we're going to let people stay back, talk one-on-one with our panelists if they so choose. And if you like this session and if you like talking about ethical enterprises, remember to stay back. Well, not stay back, but there's another session happening again at 6 o'clock with the same link. So thanks again. Yeah. Clap. I feel like it claps. Yay. Thanks so much to our panelists. And if Sally, Sharon and Nick, if you want to say something about what your businesses are up to right now, how we can reach out to help support you guys, that would be amazing.
Does anyone know about Green Collect or been to any of our stores? We're in the western suburbs, probably quite far from Monash Uni, actually.
Visit them.
I haven't been to the stores, but I've looked at you guys online. So how could we as students actually help?
Yeah. Oh, well, from our perspective, we've loaded some Mother's Day care packages on our website. So an example is we just spent $10,000 in Mother's Day stock just prior to COVID. So we stock really beautiful sustainability and ethical products. So we have our own products, but we also source beautiful products that help people to live more environmentally or, you know, thinking about people and planet. So we were stuck with all of this stock and no one can come into our shop. So we've made care packages. They're on our website. So if you want something for your mum, jump online. I think they range from $40 might be the starting point. And we're delivering them for free if you're in a surrounding suburb. So, you know, purchasing from social enterprises is a really good thing to do because you know that your dollar is actually going towards a really important cause. I mean, you know, I know students don't have a lot of money, so I think it's encouraging just even having interest and having people say, you know, give feedback and ideas. That's just as encouraging and valuable too.
Thank you.
I just jumped on, Sally, and sent the link to my partner for my mum and her mum. So appreciate that very much.
Awesome.
It's funny. I think for us in our perspective as well, given that we're all offering kind of products and, you know, there's availability for that side of things. Like obviously, it's the easiest way to support us, you know, because that's kind of why we put it out to market in a way, is that you know, that's the most tangible means of I guess support, and we prefer you to get our products, you know, even sometimes in lieu of a donation, because, you know, when you buy a t-shirt or whatever it is from Homey, like, you know, you're also wearing that, becoming a brand advocate and ambassador for us. So, you know, that's obviously the logic behind having that product as well, is like, you know, obviously not just purchasing it, but obviously utilizing it, you know, wearing it out in public and all the rest of it. You know, I guess social media marketing around, you know, what's also valuable is, you know, liking us on and following us on, you know, Instagram and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, those things are really easy, I guess. They're like kind of the most meaningful kind of means that we have right now in terms of, you know, support, I guess. But then beyond that, if you're looking to kind of, my advice would be, if you're looking to volunteer or, you know, whatever it is with an organisation, that like one thing that's often, especially with social enterprises and businesses, is as Sally said, like, I'm someone who didn't have acumen and all that kind of stuff, but what you want to really have is people that come in and just kind of pick up the slack, you know, and run with it. And once again, you don't have a lot of time in terms of you're trying to manage many different things. So if someone can come into your organisation and provide a value add, you know, readily available, and it might not be something traditional that you thought, like it might not be working, you know, hands-on in our store. We don't actually have the opportunity because it's reserved for the young people that we work with. But if you're good at spreadsheets and could, you know, help us in terms of doing a cash flow forecast or something, like those are really interesting value adds if you're looking to get practical experience in organisations that do obviously operate as a social enterprise and all the rest of it. Is, I would say, is kind of think about what your skill set is outside of just the kind of manual labour tasks, which are sometimes required in these places. But that's kind of a really great way to get in these organisations. And what we would look for is if someone could come in with a really specific kind of skill set and value add that would actually complement what we're doing and not add more work. That's kind of how you can obviously get yourself that really practical experience. So think outside the box in terms of what are the things that you're really good at. It might be that you're a great, illustrator or a graphic designer and could do some designs for us. Like that kind of stuff is a lot more valuable than volunteering, at one of our VIP days, that kind of stuff. We have all the resources there already. So that's kind of a piece of advice I would give certainly if you're looking to kind of get exposure with these kind of initiatives is more of those kind of unconventional, non-traditional means of volunteering, but they're far more valuable to us and I'm sure a lot of other organisations.
Yeah.
Sharon, do you have anything you want to say about your business right now?
No, I think I've said a fair bit. I can't think of anything else at the moment. Yeah.
So Sharon, are your products online? What do we look up?
Yeah, so it's Indigiearth.com.au. So all of our products are obviously now online. I am in the process of developing some online videos of like cooking. So doing, instead of me being out, but doing a bush tucker cooking demonstration that people can watch and like easy to use recipes at home with native ingredients, a little masterclass online. So moving that kind of stuff online for people to learn and share as well. But yeah, we have lots of products online, hampers and gift packs as well.
Cool. Yeah, and I think, as we're a bit older, I don't do the social stuff a lot in terms of social media, but you guys and your generation, I mean, it's just a whole nother way of life you're growing up in, and sharing our stuff and to your friends and promoting things, that expanding our reach and helping us build our brands. We don't have massive budgets for that like our competitors do. So if, it's that word of mouth and engaging online, that can be worth a lot for a business, because you could share it to someone and you don't know where that goes, and none of us have big budgets for that. So, that is actually really valuable even just to share our socials and, think about how you can promote, if you come across something good, you want to share it. So, I think that's worth a lot to social enterprises.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, I kind of have a question for all of you. I'm just wondering how you balance your pursuit of profit, because you are a business, and your ethical mission, because maybe sometimes pursuing that ethical mission maybe incorporates like fair work or making sure every step in your supply chain is ethical, which may kind of increase costs. So I'm wondering how you tackle those sort of decisions.
Oh yeah, it's really tough. I guess, as I said, the bottom line is without any profit, there's no purpose. So you have to be looking at the numbers and you have to find ways to be making good margins on your products if you're offering those. I'll give you an example. A real challenge, I think an unfortunate stigma with production and sourcing, all the rest of it is people make assumptions like, if it's made overseas that it's unethical. And unfortunately, there are certainly, cases and they've been well publicised where that has been the case, absolutely. And it's really hard to navigate that space. But offshore doesn't mean unethical. There certainly are, factories and all the rest of it engaging in production that do meet, a lot of the standards that are set, and it's heavily regulated as well. And the more that it's been exposed, the better, these factories have gotten. And look, we are for a long time in Melbourne in terms of all of our garments, and we've actually just made a shift recently, and we are using in conjunction with some of our made in Melbourne products, some offshore production with some factories that we've established connections with via our business networks, in the sense of using the same supplier that Champion are using for their stuff here, and ensuring that they're adhering to all fair work conditions and all the rest of it, and compliance. And we have peace of mind with all the information that we've received, and people that we know who've gone and visited and all the rest of it, that it is the right condition. and workplace, and in some cases actually better than some of the workplaces here that are doing production. So it's just a shame because unfortunately there is a stigma, around that side of things. But for us, it was a non-negotiable in finding some other supply opportunities, because we just don't, we wouldn't make enough money otherwise. And then ultimately we're not actually fulfilling, the less money, less gross profit we have, the less, we can do in terms of our true mission, which is really obviously our employment program. So, that's just an insight into kind of a critical decision that we had to make. But one of the things that we are constantly tackling is obviously just that stigma now of, because not everything is made in Melbourne, questions about, well, where is it made and is it unethical and the rest of it. And we're just doing a massive website audit, providing as much information as possible, because, transparency is, if you can just be as transparent as possible and share all the information that you have at your, disposal, then that's the most important thing. So I guess that's just an example of what we've had to do with our business to remain viable and to ensure that, we've got the best interests of the people that we're trying to support here at heart, and certainly ensuring that we're not exploiting or exposing anyone who is involved in the process with us. So, I guess it's just a shame, and it's tough that, the reputations that, some people ruin it for the many.
Mm. And I mean, brand reputation's everything for social enterprises or ethical enterprises, because, that our brand essentially says we're excellent at the environment or social or whatever it is. And people are pretty quick to tear you down if you don't meet up to a standard. And sometimes, like Nick said, some of those standards aren't well informed, and maybe based on historical practices. Mm. So for us, when we look at risk, so our board obviously has to manage risk, both financial but also brand reputation. And when you're small, you can't take a big hit. You have BP and Shell and whoever, massive oil spills, terrible things happen, and yet somehow they survive and they almost come through unscathed. But small businesses can't recover from those things very well. So for us, environmentally, we will never cut a corner, because we believe in that, and we don't want to run a business that isn't ethical, but our brand is built on that. So, so that's partly actually a profit or a financial driven decision, because people choose us because of that. So we put a lot of effort into our due diligence around supply chain. We have a commitment to local solutions. That's really hard. There's not very high margins in the waste industry. And last year with the recycling crisis, that highlighted a lot of bad practice. So, it's hard running something that's open to scrutiny all the time. So we have to invest in making sure all of our things are ethical, but it does cost us. Costs a lot to hand sort waste in Australia. That's why we ship it off overseas. It's not that we can't process it. It's because in Australia, no one's prepared to pay the true cost for the manual sorting, because labour's cheaper overseas. So it costs us to do what we do, but that's where education and our communications is so important. It's more expensive to use us than to use any other waste company like 1-800-GOT-JUNK, but we need to let the customer know why you would pay a bit more to use us. So that's our responsibility. We don't want to tear them down. We just need to focus on telling our story. And I don't know if we've done a very good job in that, because again, our communications budget's not high, but and there are grey issues, and I suppose you just make the best decision you can and educate people along the way as to why you might have made a certain decision, like Nick said. So I think education's a big part of it for social enterprises, to talk about your impact and why you've done what you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say as well, Sally, for your own peace of mind, in terms of our landfill, obviously, and obviously we're in consumption and production, but the way that we operate, I guess, is, and for the audience's own personal knowledge, we've actually created a sub-brand recently called Reborn by Homie, where we take all of our garments that haven't sold as such, all the blanks, and we repurpose and upcycle them, so cutting and sewing and producing one-of-a-kind pieces, and then obviously selling them on as well. But I guess the other beauty and benefit is that we have our VIP shopping days where any excess stock that we don't move as such is also available on that day as well. So obviously it's going to people, and what they do after that is at their own discretion, but we've kind of tried to create a link where, people understand that like the lifetime of the products, there are two kind of scenarios in which it can have another chance at rebirth. And then one of our board members has actually invested and created a piece of technology called, might be interesting for yourself, called BlockText. Now what they do is they are able to, they've got a factory in Queensland, and they can actually disseminate the fibres from a garment back down to, and separate them back down to their natural state. So they can take a t-shirt that's 80% cotton, 20% polycotton, whatever it is, and actually break it right down to its raw material, and then repurpose as well. So we're looking into that, which is pretty cool, but that might be something to check out. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've tried to find some textile recycling companies in Melbourne, but it's pretty hard. I think, textile recycling, I think, is the next thing. I'm not quite sure why it doesn't happen more. We ship off our textile waste generally, and it's not a good outcome. So that's good. Yeah.
I'll send a link right now to the...
yeah, awesome. Thanks.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
I have a question. So I guess Nick and Sally, you both founded your companies when you were like extremely young. Nick, I think I read that you founded it when you were like 21, and I'm turning 21. So I find that both a bit demotivating and inspiring in a way, because I feel like, oh, I haven't done anything in like this time that I've been alive. I haven't even like thought about finding a social enterprise. So like, did you find that your youth was like a hindrance or like a added benefit to finding you?
Oh, I'm sure you've done a lot more in your 21 years. Congratulations, than you think you have, and things that have held you in good stead. So I think, look, I, being 21, but I'd been overseas a couple of times, had that experience. I had good people around me, friends and family, and those are kind of the foundational things that you require, I think, if you want to kind of get going in anything in life. So if anything, I think, ignorance is bliss to an extent. And as Sally said, the repercussions of failing at it, more when you're younger and all the rest of it, you just don't know any better. Like if I had, honestly, in hindsight, known that, we had $20,000 that we crowdfunded, and we entered into a lease that was like $5,000 a month, and that's all we had really. We didn't have any stock, we didn't have any of this kind of stuff. I just didn't know any better. Like if I was of sane mind, I wouldn't have done that. You know what I mean? In the sense that, reflecting on it now, but you've got nothing to lose. Like you can just be so cavalier, and it's such a great time to just experiment, in regards to that side of things, like that path and that journey. And I didn't have clarity on my purpose in terms of, I didn't know what my end game or goal was. I just had some principles that I wanted to apply to trialing something. So I knew I was really passionate about this issue in particular. I wanted to try and find a way to add value. But for us, it was just, we spoke a lot early days, Marcus and myself, about just, transparency and integrity and respect, and then creativity were like our values. And we're like, well, let's just try and do whatever we do, but incorporate those, because we knew how to practice those. And that just held us in such good stead. So I think, it's as good a time as any to really, explore, but you don't have to kind of come up with this idea that's going to change the world overnight or get started. I think the fact that you're already interested in like taking the time to be part of this discussion and facilitate it is a lot more than someone who's your age would be doing right now anyway. So, I think you just got to kind of let it flow. And it is really intuitive and organic. And for us, it was initially, this voluntary thing we were doing for a couple of hours a week, and then it turned into something, bigger, and then it evolved again and again and again. So just doing something, I think, is better than nothing, and just learn as you go. Like intuition's great, but you always ask for what is it? Forgiveness, not permission. That's always the benefit of being a young person as well.
I also have another question. Sorry, unless anyone else has a question to ask, I'll go ahead. You've talked a lot about how much hard work is put into starting a social enterprise. And you also talked about self-care. So I'm wondering how you kind of put the work you need to put in to make sure it's successful whilst balancing self-care, making sure there's time to unwind and reset. Because I know that's something I struggle with a lot, especially now everything's online. So I feel like I should always be doing work. But how do you kind of separate work and then rest to make sure that you're actually doing the work well?
Maybe Sally. I'll just intro that. I reckon Sally can answer that. But I'm such a firm believer in time off being just as important as time on, and I preach that to all of our staff and our team, and try and live by that creed as well and demonstrate that. But I reckon Sally have a bloody good answer to that.
Sharon, were you going to say something?
Oh, for years, I just worked and worked and worked because I really wanted to make what I was doing successful. But I did always make sure that I had time out, especially for my kids. I become a single mum when the kids were a lot younger as well. But even now, like, I still work a lot of hours, but I'm fortunate enough to live out of town on some acreage. So, I have my horses in the backyard, and just being out with the animals, even if it's just half an hour of a morning or of an afternoon, just being outdoors, reconnecting for me with Mother Earth, and just being with animals is my kind of time out. And even if it's just half an hour a day, then that's what it takes for me. So it is extremely important. Otherwise you will burn out, you'll run out of energy, and you'll start making wrong decisions. You'll be tired, and yeah, you'll just suffer from it.
So I didn't know Sharon was still there. I should have said both Sally and Sharon. That's awesome.
Please, sorry about that. I was using my hotspot for my phone and it just died.
That's okay.
That's okay, no worries.
It's probably an entrepreneurial sacrifice running a small business to using your own personal data.
Yeah. Do you have anything about how we can practice self-care, especially like when it's a lot of work? So what we're talking about is, how to practice self-care when you're putting a lot of work into starting your social enterprise. Oh, has she frozen?
Yeah, she's frozen for me.
Yeah, she's frozen a little bit. Oh, wait, hold on, just coming back. Oh, yeah, we're good.
I was using my
Okay, so shall we move to the next session? It's keyboard. So let's look at the
Sorry,
question.
I just wanted to get back on to say goodbye rather than disappearing.
Okay. Oh. I think it's frozen again. Oh well.
I have a question for Sharon.
Yep.
I really like the idea of your videos online about how to cook it, because I feel like as youth, especially uni students, like we don't really know how to use those native products in our foods. So I feel like it's a really good way to put it online. Will that be on your website, or like how would we access that?
Yeah, they will be on the website, and they'll be free to access for people as well. So, just really easy ways and cheap ways to use, and even, just buying kangaroo meat from the supermarket and being able to cook with it and make really healthy meals with it. So, they'll all be available on the website.
Amazing. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Oh yeah, I've got a question for all three of you. I'm sure you've had many achievements throughout your journey from the time you started your enterprise up until today. But if you were to share one particular achievement or really rewarding moment, what would that be?
For me, it was in 2013. I was the first Aboriginal person to become New South Wales Business Leader of the Year award. And for me, I never really took those kind of accolades on board up until then. And then I actually realised that it was really important to help build business and confidence for other Aboriginal women, for other women who've been through lots of different challenges in life. So besides my children, that would be the next big thing that was really good for me.
Sorry, so that's pretty epic. I would say for mine, the best moment I have continue to experience is when we have the graduates of our employment program come back and facilitate the VIP Day experience for other young people. That's probably a really great kind of symbolic moment where you see someone go from one side of the ledger as someone who's coming as a recipient and a client one of those VIP days, coming to get something from us, to then, in the period of 8 months, etc., then being on the other side of the register and actually serving another person and making that connection. So that's probably from a, I guess, an impact perspective where I see the real magic happen and all the rest of it. So that's probably a real highlight. And then we had a pretty cool night last year that was kind of a bit out of this world, where we were invited to an event through GQ, the Men of the Year Awards, and we won an Impact Award there. And that was just quite funny, a bit surreal to kind of be there with the who's who. And, it was from Hollywood A-listers to Aussie D-listers, but it was funny to be in the same room and to get to go on stage and, give your 2 cents. Was great. So that was just a personal kind of, just an added bonus to everything else, but certainly not obviously the key motivating factor, but it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of fun to have those moments because, like, Sharon and Nick have said, there's so much behind the scenes unglamorous work that no one ever sees. And sometimes having moments where you do kind of get to be in a room where you're acknowledged feels really good. And we had a funny one last year where we're invited to Sydney to Westpac's Supplier of the Year Award. And I was like, I don't think I'll go up for it. And they're like, no, this is a big deal. Anyway, it ended up being a black tie event, and someone had told me it was okay to wear jeans. So it was very humiliating, and I was relieved that we didn't win because I just didn't want to have to go up the front in my jeans when everyone else was wearing ball gowns and stuff. But just seeing our name and our logo up on the big screen with Allianz, Mirvac, Green Collect, it was just one of those surreal moments where you go, what? We're up there with those guys. It's nice to have those moments. Last year we won Small to Medium Social Enterprise of the Year. And that was a bit of a buzz just because I think being recognised by your peers, most of my time is spent working in the enterprise, quite inwardly focused, and it's nice to sometimes have that recognition, and especially because our path has been so rocky. We've nearly gone under quite a few times, so to kind of be recognised in that way is really, it's nice to actually celebrate the wins, because often, sorry, my dog's barking to get in, so often you're down on yourself for the things you haven't done well, or you're always thinking of what isn't done. And I suppose that maybe is a little bit of advice too, when we were talking about that, is to really recognise when good things happen and to be able to pat yourself on the back and feel proud, because so often we remember the things or think about the things that we're not doing well, and maybe we can be a bit too hard on ourselves. Yeah.
Agreed. Hey, sorry guys, I've got 2 phone calls to make. Then I've actually got, we practice gratitude and drinks with the staff at 5. So I've got to jump off.
Thanks. Me too.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for the questions, but also to Sally and Sharon, it was lovely to hear about you guys, and I look forward purchasing some products on Mother's Day from both of you. So
Yeah, awesome. Me too.
thanks, guys. Thanks for your time. And thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Is on.
I'll need to go as well, so I'm not sure if you're wrapping up soon.
Yeah.
I think it's almost time to.
Yeah, I think we'll finish it there with a nice note on being proud of your accomplishments, because you work really hard for it. And these are amazing businesses that I think we should all support. So thanks to Nick, who's left, and Sally and Sharon for joining us today and sharing their insights into what it's like to run an ethical business. So thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely to be here with you all, and good luck in all of your endeavours.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.